January 13th was the day our team left for Haiti. It will be a trip that I will never forget. As we left the airport and headed to Matthew 25, our hospitality house, the ride was a huge eye-opener. The buildings and houses were the same as they were a year ago when the earthquake hit. Not much had changed. There are still thousands of people living in tent cities. It is hard to imagine your whole life inside of a tent. The people have very little in their lives, but yet seem so content. Many want food and water, and as we stopped at corners and at the very few stoplights that do exist, the children come up to the car and press their face to the window. They want money, they rub their bellies, they're hungry, and they're so helpless. We took 6 SUVs loaded with supplies up the mountains towards Seguin. The trip took us a little over 8 hours as we stopped for lunch along the way. I will never complain again about Michigan roads ever again after having to drive on roads that were not much more than huge rocks and dirt. We arrived in Seguin, and right away the next morning began to set up the clinic. People would wait for hours until it was their turn into the clinic. Once into the clinic, we gave them Vermox, a deworming pill. During the 5 days of clinic, we saw roughly 2,000 people. Many people at the clinic had to walk 5 or 6 hours, some longer, to get there. It was raining a lot and made the journey that much worse for them as they had to climb the steep hillsides of the mountain. Some had no shoes at all, while others had broken flip-flops or shoes that didn't match. The people were also polite. They were grateful for any help that we could offer to them. It was cold in the mountains. You seldom saw anyone with a coat on. A lot of the children were shivering as they entered the clinic, rubbing their arms. We handed out all the baby blankets, ponchos, baby kits, clothes, and stuffed animals that we had. The look on the children's faces that were of pure joy as they received their gifts. The pregnant women all received a warm crocheted baby hat and newborn kit, and the mothers with small babies received a blanket to wrap their baby in. We were so blessed to have such a great medical and dental team. We all worked so well together. During clinic, we had 2 babies born. One mother's water broke the night before, and she entered clinic first thing the next morning. We set up a big piece of plywood and some cushion for her to lay on. She was not dilating as fast as we had hoped, and her blood pressure was continuing to climb. It was not a safe situation for mom or baby. Dr. Ellie, a Haitian doctor, took the time out and drove her 3 hours to the nearest hospital. He sat with her and made sure she was admitted and okay before he left. We received a call later that night. Mom had delivered a healthy baby girl. A few days later in the evening after dinner, we received a knock on the rectory door from a frantic family that needed medical attention for a young man about 18 years old. Earlier that afternoon, the young man was stoned by a group of men. Just like in biblical times, he was stoned. He had huge, deep lacerations on his face. He needed stitches and crutches to walk. This man was in poor shape. We later learned that his family walked 6 hours in the dark alongside him as he rode on horseback. That evening, his family stayed in Seguin so that the next morning the doctors could change his bandages. We saw that man 3 days in a row. Another morning, first thing, a man carried his wife into the clinic. He sat her down in a chair and she was just shaking. Dr. Ellie was the first to see this woman. Her husband told us that she was pregnant. Dr. Ellie delivered the baby as the baby looked to be about 3 pounds. She was not doing well at all. The baby was baptized as mom held her. It was not much longer, maybe 45 minutes, that the baby girl had passed away. Dr. Ellie did all that he could to save her. Mom had picked out a baby blanket and wrapped her up. She got dressed, and they carried the baby home to bury her. We take so many things for granted here in the U.S. It was hard to see such devastation. It was all very overwhelming at times. I made a lot of friends in Seguin. The kids would ask my name, and once they knew your name, they never forgot it. They were not shy about asking for anything. Some children did not attend school, and they would just hang out by the doors of the clinic just for something to do to pass the time. We had one full day at the end of the trip to spend in Port-au-Prince. We went sightseeing and visited Mother Teresa's orphanage. It was just unreal to see the cathedral in ruins, knowing that it used to house 2,000 people on any given day, and it's just gone. The one thing left standing outside that was not touched is the statue of Jesus. That was a very powerful statement. The time we spent at Mother Teresa's was so hard. It was heart-wrenching to see all the infants and children that just wanted to be held. A few stuffed animals hung from the ceiling. It was very hot and the windows were open. You could not tell the boys from the girls as all the children wore the same yellow flower dress. The children had no stuffed animals or books. We sang to them. They had no idea what we were singing, but they still clapped. We managed to get a few smiles out of them. One little boy broke my heart. His name was Orlando, and he was 8. He looked to be about 4 years old and was so tiny. As we were holding the other children, one of the nurses brought Orlando in. He had a catheter in. He sat down in a tiny little plastic beach chair. his little bowl that he had to sit at his feet while his drain fed into it. He sat with big eyes and watched all that was going on. He had a rubber glove that he would blow up like a balloon. Lunch that day for the children was half of a hard-boiled egg. The nurse left the room for us to feed the kids. As they ate the eggs that crumbled to the ground, it was hard to see them just eating half of an egg. Once the egg was gone, there was nothing more. I took a few plastic cups and dipped them into the 5-gallon bucket that sat under the table and gave the kids a drink. I felt bad for Orlando since he was bigger than the other kids. So when the nurse left and was not looking, I gave him another half of an egg. Downstairs was the area of the tiny babies. The cries were many. I found one little boy standing in his crib, no sounds, just looking. I swooped him up and went outside in the shaded area. He laid his head down, and I scratched his back until he fell asleep. I didn't want to leave without taking at least 10 kids back home with me. As I was leaving, I saw Orlando on the way out. He didn't see me watching him. He got up from his little chair and carefully stood on it. He lifted one leg over the crib and then the other. He carefully took his drain and strung it through the bars on the crib. He kneeled in the crib and bent over to make sure his drain lay in the little plastic blue bowl. He then laid his head down in the crib to take his nap. No pillow, no stuffed animal, and no blanket. My heart was aching as I left. There is so much to do for these people. So much time in Haiti is needed. I'm so blessed to have been able to go along on this trip. I'm looking forward to going again. Please keep the people in Haiti in your prayers. Please continue to support our parish as so much is yet to be